Lean startup development. I'm Boris. I've been developing since 1992, participated in quite a lot of projects. I'm also a partner at Astrails, where we do awesome web applications. So what we do at Astrails, we take an idea from a coffee shop napkin sketches and take it from there to thousands of users. So let's take a look on a very optimistic and simplified scheme of what usually it looks like. So from an idea to launch, and launch is not some date in the calendar, I will talk about it later, to success. Okay, very optimistic and very straightforward. Sometimes it works like that, when after the launch you figure out that something went wrong and it goes by this path. Sometimes it's even like that, but let's think positive and discover this particular scheme. So there is quite a lot of ideas and talks and books and everything. What have we do at this stage when you have an application up and running, and how to do pivoting, how to figure out potential issues, and how to get to this green dot. I will talk about the first step, the first stage, how we go from an idea to a launch, because the second is actually quite same. David talked about the business parts, the business point of view to the startup. I will talk about more about lean software development. So let's start. When I started to make the presentation slides, I figured out that actually I will be talking about how I learned to stop worrying and stay focused on the product. And the key word here is learned, because everything I'm going to talk about is real. It's based on real things, based on real projects, and learned sometimes in a hard way. So we have. Let's start with the theory, okay? We will walk through the theory quite fast and then get to the real things. So we have 7 principles of lean software development, and I wouldn't bore you with all the details. You can read them on the wiki article. I would just want to briefly remind what they are and how they actually applied in software development in the lean way. Let's start with 4 obvious ones. Amplify learning, empower the team, build integrity, and see the whole. Amplify learning is the idea behind the learning amplification is that you have to admit that there are some parts that you not know well, that there is a lot of things to learn even in this business domain you are working on, and that you have first of all to learn it in a proper way. You have to build something, to ship it, to see how it works, get feedback, and then understand and then learn more about this particular feature. So it's about adding more value to learning during the development. The second one is empower the team. It's about allowing everyone in your team to understand what is the project about. And this link has very important reading about this topic, why all the developers have to know, need to know what this project is about. But it says that developers don't need to know what the project is about, and this is not true. This is the whole story. Very important reading. So the next thing is build integrity in. Working less time in an isolated system. Yeah.
Are you gonna share the slide of the links?
Can we get this?
Are you gonna share the slide afterwards?
Yeah. I will share the slide on Astrails blog, so you will have access to all these slides, and you will probably also have a video shortly. Yeah. So build integrity in means that the system itself has to the people shouldn't work in an isolated system. They have to make more refactoring, clean up the code, and more automatic testing. And this is the whole must have people who understand that how the data actually flows in the system in general. So how the data is created, who uploads the pictures, who enters the letters or types something, and how it gets into the system, to the database, to the emails. I mean, every flow in the system. And three not obvious ones: eliminate waste, deliver as fast as possible, and decide as late as possible. Eliminate waste is my favorite one. David talked about this almost for an hour. It was about eliminating waste. So everything that do not deliver a value right now is a waste, and it should be eliminated. So most of the features you think are very important and you can't launch without them is waste. And they should be eliminated, postponed to a later stage, because they do not bring any value at this particular moment. And you will figure out that importance of these features grow on the later stages, and then they will become not so waste, and then they will become the important thing at the particular stage. But most of the features at the beginning is waste. Deliver as fast as possible. Again, it's the idea that you have to build something, ship it, see how people use them, and update it and fix it. And it's actually cross-referenced to amplified learning, because you learn during when your code is running somewhere and people using it, people using the product, and you learn from how people exactly using your product. And you can't learn when you have nothing outside there and you just build and build and build. So you have to deliver or ship as fast as possible. And the last one is decide as late as possible. This is also a very important principle. I want to, example, for example, is very good example of it is adding a payments in your application. So, for example, if you're going to run your project a few months for free, you don't even have to think about payment system at the beginning. Don't think about payment system. Don't think about payment flow, PayPal, credit cards, whatever. It's all these things are irrelevant, because you will be able to decide later. And deciding later is always a good idea. Sometimes you can decide later. I want to share some experience that I had about 8 years ago. I was driving on Ayalon Highway here near the Al-Ha exit, and I was driving a bit faster than it's allowed, and suddenly I figured out that some iron sheet, probably some cover like meter on meter, tears off the bus that goes on the left line, and this iron sheet flies about 5 meters and starts to fall exactly into my direction. So I had here two choices. I could speed up the car, hoping that this cover will fall behind me. And the second choice is to slow down the car and hope that this piece of iron or whatever it is fall in front of me. So I had about 20 or 50 milliseconds to make this decision. So not always decide as later as possible is a good way to act. Sometimes you have to make the decisions right away. But in 99%, deciding later is a much better idea, because there's a joke that I always talk to my clients that let's leave this decision to people much smarter than you. It's you later, because later you will have more knowledge, more ideas, more feedbacks from a field to make a proper decision, and not to make some decision now and then redecide later, or make some decision now and then build some future assumptions on a decision that has been made without actual basis. So later we all will be much smarter. So the decisions that are done by smarter people are much better. So how to start? We always suggest to start with one-pager document, and it actually should be, even preferably, would be one-paragraph document that explains the problem, the solution, and the product that in some way reflects the solution. Then it's probably, if you are able to get to one paragraph instead of one-page document, it means that you are super focused on what you are doing, and this is good. The next would be to create a scope document, which is about few pages as well, but it will describe all the features or all the functionality that you have in the application. So sometimes writing these documents have some kind of mental blocks, so I suggest to use nicely designed software to overcome it. For example, IA Writer allows you to focus on the text that you are writing, and even this 2 pages document will be much fun to write than use Pages or Microsoft Word or whatever you use. It's very important when you think about the features on your product to think from the content creation flow. So content creation flow is a concept that says that at the beginning there is nothing, like a Bible in Tanakh, there is nothing. The next thing is user that should be able to log in and register somehow to the application or a website or whatever. And then this user creates, let's say we're talking about marketplace where a user can sell things to people around them. And next thing would be that people should be able to make a picture of the thing that they're going to sell and upload it to the market store. And then probably there is some pre-moderation done by admins or post-moderation done by admins, and then admins should be able to log in and register, etc., etc. So at every particular time when you think about some feature, you shouldn't operate any terms that were not defined before. This way allows, again, to focus on exactly what you're going to build without spending your time or wasting your time and finally money on things that are not irrelevant. The next thing is estimate everything. Think about budget that will require to build this, to design this, to make a copy for this, to do everything, and figure out that you don't have this money. So the next step is eliminate waste. Get out of the features you don't actually need. And there is a very simple question of how to identify the feature that you don't need. Will this application still survive, or this idea or this project survive, if you launch without these particular features? And like David showed, about 80% of things is a waste, and the application will survive without this feature. So if this is not something that brings you value right away, it's a waste. Next thing would be to have a pages and screen definitions and try to think about what kind of data are you going to show on this particular screen. So you'll have probably the screen with a user profile where users be able to change their pictures, edit some descriptions or whatnot. And if you have simple list of things that are displayed on this particular page, it would again very help to focus on what you are doing. I highly recommend Workflow and Hackpad. Both of them allow this. It's for free. Hackpad is not exactly for free, but up to 3 users is for free. It's a very useful piece of software that, again, allows you to focus on what you're doing. Next thing is actually the most important thing of the whole project, is wireframes. Wireframes is a piece of paper when you use a pen and write the screens on these pieces of paper. Naturally, there is quite a lot of software to allow to do the same thing electronically, but the best wireframe is done manually with a piece of paper and the pen. And there are actually 2 kinds of wireframes. First kind is called functional wireframes, when you just have different elements on the page from the functionality point of view. So if there is some kind of action button, it should be there. It could be small. You never find it at the first glance, but it's there. This is because it's a functional wireframe. Here is an example of a functional wireframe. One step backward. We did a very nice free service called ISRO Tracker. I personally did it for myself. I purchased a lot of things online abroad. And I hate waiting for these red pieces of paper because they from the post office, because they always late. So I wrote a service that you can drop your registered mail number, tracking number, into this application, and once the package status is changed, it will send you an email. So usually emails come a few days before the red piece of paper comes to your mailbox. So getting back to that, there is a logon branding and some kind of area where you will put some content later. select language, probably some kind of language selection that will be done later. Logout, pending delivered, it's kind of switch between two kind of filters, and edit tracking number, it's a button on the page, and some bottom links, frequently asked questions, and etc., etc. So when designer looks at that, his first thing would be how I fill these areas. So what should I put on the logo and branding? How will I build the language selection area? And this is what's called functional wireframe. This is more design wireframe. It actually shows up absolutely the same functionality, but it has more details. And the designer don't have to think how exactly he has to implement this. So the language selection page will be links, and there will be a logo on the left-hand side and a brand name on the right-hand side, etc., etc. So the only thing that left to do is to color, please excuse me, to color this page up. And this is how it looked like in real life. I mean, we have all the same buttons and the language selection tool, etc. So why the wireframes are so important? Because behind every element on the wireframe, there is also some functionality like email sending, or some database fields like, you know, booleans and strings, etc. And once you build the wireframes, you're actually building the product. Once you see the wireframes, it's absolutely clear in 99% how to build the database, how to build the requests, what kind of pages will be there. So this is why it's important. But another important thing is that you can test your flows directly on wireframes. You don't have to build the application and then figure out that there are some usability issues. You can really take the wireframe, look at it, and imagine that you click a button and go to another page. And then you will figure out that some important pages are 5 clicks away instead of 2 clicks away, without actually building any code, by just drawing these things on a piece of paper. The next thing is working with designer. This is very tough, because there are different kind of designers. They understand different things. They work using different approaches. And the most important part here is to identify from the 25 to 35 usually pages for the web application, about 3 or 5 screens for a mobile application. Identify the key pages that will include all the elements that are reused on other pages. So if you have a sidebar, you don't need to design all the page with the sidebar. You just have to say this is the sidebar, and this is a key page that holds this sidebar, and when you need a sidebar, this is how sidebar look, take it from there. Some designers will come, look at your wireframes and say, this is shit, you have to redo everything, you have to regroup elements, move them from the page to page, and this is designer you want to hire. If you see the designer says, okay, I will do exactly what you need, take your functional or design wireframes and just you know, facelift it, you don't want to work with this kind of designer, because you always want to hear feedbacks from somebody who are going to build the face of your application. And if he disagrees with you at any point of your flow, it at least worth some, you know, consideration to change or to update your flow. So once all your designs are ready, the next thing is to create user stories. There was a question on the previous lecture about user stories. So user story is a short explanation of the feature from the user point of view. So the user story, there are many projects that allows you to do that. I personally love Trello, and there is Pivotal Tracker, which is also not bad, but Pivotal Tracker is more focusing on agile development, and it doesn't allow to move aside from agile development, so you can't do your own states, etc. I will talk about it a bit later. So I personally use Trello for more or less everything. If I have to organize any piece of information, I usually use Trello. So this is an example of user stories. Once you build the user stories, you should write some short sentences, which looks like user should be able to log in and register with a Facebook. User should be able to add a package with a tracking number. And then package updates and notification emails. Why this is in without details and in big letters, capital letters. The idea behind that is that you can decide as late as possible. So you know that people will have to log in and register with Facebook, and you know they will have to add numbers, somehow to add package numbers, but you don't know now, and you don't have to decide how exactly you will implement the package updates. This is something that can be decided later. No need to waste time and money and your mental energy to define these things right now. They can be defined later. Same with notification emails. It will be something that will come up naturally. You will have all the great ideas. Once you've written this down, somewhere in the background, your brain will think about it, and when time comes, you will know how to remove these package updates and write something readable and testable that people that will write the software will understand. So decide as late as possible. Getting back to the stories, every story has its state, so meaning that sometime at the beginning it's an idea, then somebody works on it, then you have to test it, etc. So Trello allows you to manage cards and put them into columns. So every column in a Trello, it's actually the state of the story. At the beginning, all the stories, all the great ideas get to the icebox. Then when we start working on something, we move it to a backlog. And then when it is ready, it's go to pending. And when it's deployed to staging and ready for testing, it's in staging testing. And when it's accepted, cool, it's in accepted. And when it's rejected, and naturally the last one is in production. So every feature that did it to production will appear in the last column. So the most important thing when working with stories is to divide them into two parts. The first group of the stories will be called closed loop. The closed loop is the very, very, very basic implementation of every feature in the system. So if you have somewhere login with Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn and username password, the closed loop will have only one of them. Let's say Facebook. So it means you have some kind of login, you can implement it and go on. You will get back to all these features later in the second stage. So this actually refers to deliver as fast as possible. So another important thing about closed loop, that closed loop usually takes about 40 or 50% of the time to implement. It means that after 50 or 40% of the estimated time and budget, you already have working application that you can test, that you can work with, that you can show off to your customers, potential customers, current customers, new customers, investors, friends, start getting feedbacks while you keep developing it. So this is a very powerful approach. And again, the idea behind this is the simplest possible implementation. Do it and move on. Well, at some point of time, you'll have to write some code. And once the code is written, it should be reviewed. I mean that you have to have another pair or at least one eye to look at the code that somebody else wrote. We suggest to use GitHub pull requests. And we also suggest to use some continuous integration and deployment and static code analysis. For example, CircleCI, Code Climate. And this is, again, refers to the principle of building integrity in. So if somebody else will look at your code, it will naturally figure out some bugs or some issues that you haven't think about, and it will significantly increase the quality of the code. And also, in addition, if you use some external services for continuous integration, it will ensure that the quality of your code is good. The next thing is staging deployments. You will usually have from few stages deployment a day to a few staging deployment a week. It also refers to the idea deliver as fast as possible. And once something is ready, it must go to staging server, and somebody else have to look at this and really click on the buttons or tap on the icons or images and see how this thing actually works, because the first line of QA is acceptance testing. So somebody manually really goes to the application, runs it, and clicks on the buttons and verifies that everything is OK. Another thing behind the acceptance testing is this is exactly the time when all the cool ideas how to improve and how to simplify the things are born. This is done usually during this stage. And when we have automatic regression testing, it could be unit functional testing or integration testing for critical passes, I do not suggest to do the integration testing right at the beginning. I'd suggest to emulate browser, how users exactly clicks. You can't script around browsers, but it's usually quite expensive and long tasks. So I'd suggest to do it when you have a really running product. Then you have to script around the browser and emulate people adding things to basket, getting to checkout, and paying for the basket. Another thing is refactoring. We never have time for this shit, and refactoring is actually cleaning up the code, because some of the solutions or some of the code wasn't written in the proper way, and this is this is the result of the deliver fast. So sometimes we do some shortcuts, and these shortcuts should be cleaned up, and it actually ensures that the maintainability of the code remains the same. And it's not exactly about maintainability, because it's a buzzword. What the real thing we should care about is the cost of change. And all the refactoring is about maintaining the same cost of change. So if in the future we want to add some feature, we have to be able to add it relatively cheap, and not starting to change everything in the code in order to, move a button or doing some simple things. And again, as shortcuts are results of deliver fast principle, and this accumulates technical debt. And technical debt usually comes with an interest rate. So when you have to deliver or implement something, without refactoring, without code cleanups, it will cost more and more and more and more. And finally, you might find yourself in a situation when some simple change takes weeks instead of hours. So that's why refactoring is a very important thing, because it's returning this technical debt. And sometimes developers beg to give them some time for refactoring, not because they love to do the same thing twice, and not because they love to polish some features. It's because they want to return this debt. At some point of time, it will be a launch, and it's not in the date in the calendar. We will launch at the January 1st, 2014. It's about the completeness of the feature set. So when your application from the feature set perspective is complete, you have all the features that you sometimes ashamed to show, but it has. This is the time to launch it. It is, again, refers to deliver fast. You launch the application, you start getting feedbacks, and you see how these things works. And here, well, the fun begins, because now you have the application and you're in the second stage, from the launch to success. So here you start getting feedbacks and pivoting and trying to get to the green dot. And the good news is that new feature lifetime is more or less the same. It's not more or less the same, it's exactly the same. So at the beginning there is discussion about new feature, what it brings to a product, what value it will bring. And this is about see the whole, right? So everybody knows everything about the product. So this is why you have to discuss this feature with developers or just with developers. Then wireframe and design everything. And then have write testable user stories, so that people will read and understand how exactly you split the whole functionality to separate stories. Then development and code reviews, and then acceptance testing, and finally production deployment. I will summarize all the not obvious issues, all the not obvious principles. The first is eliminate waste. So do not do anything that doesn't bring value right now. Deliver as fast as possible is have the simplest implementation possible, do it and move on. And decide as late as possible is leave the decision to be made by much smarter people than you. It's your later. And getting back to my decision that I had to do while driving on Ayalon Highway, I decided to slow down. And this piece of iron fell right on me without significant damage. Just windshield, front mirror was broken, and a few scratches on the right-hand side of the car and the roof. So I believe, I mean, if it would fail with another Angel, it would just cut in half the whole car and me inside this car. So I believe I did the right decision. Thank you. I tried to do it fast so we have some time for questions. Do we have any? So everything was clear. Yeah.
Decision making whether or not take any development outsource.
Can you please come again a bit louder?
Please relate to questions or decisions whether or not to take any of the development to outsource it.
Okay. This is very simple. This is very simple decision. If you can hire, yeah, the question was when to take the development to outsource and when not, right? Okay. This is a very simple question because if you have somebody in-house who has enough experience and knowledge to build the application, it could be your co-founder or some employee, you just don't want to outsource anything if he's able to build this. If he's not able to build this with a given time and budget, you probably have to outsource some part of your application. But again, at some point of time, because one of the principles says, see the whole picture, your people inside your company will have to know the whole picture and the whole data flow. So how the data goes, what are how the integration with third parties works, I mean everything. And the last option is when you don't have any technical people at all. This is also possible. Then you have to find some reliable partner that will take care, outsource library partner that will take care of the development. Okay, cool. So we will have the videos sometime. Shai will tell you exactly when, and I will post the slides on astrails.com, so you'll be able to download them from our blog. Thank you very much.